Hello, everybody. It's Mrs. Bean. I'm going to continue reading Marshfield Dreams by Ralph Fletcher. And we are on a chapter entitled Friends right now. He's age 10. And he has a photograph of Joey, me, Andy Hunt, Steve Fishman, and Jimmy. And they look like they're all in like Cub Scout uniforms. Would you agree? I think so. So age 9. Here we go. Andy Hunt lived next door. I loved the way his eyes crinkled up when he heard something funny. When Andy laughed, the whole world lit up, like the sun coming from behind a cloud. His black hair hung straight down, and he'd shake water out of it like a wet dog after we went swimming. Every day I knocked on his back door, or he knocked on mine. If he wasn't home, I'd wait for him outside, and it seemed like forever until the Hunt's car finally pulled into the driveway and Andy ran over to play. Steve Fishman lived on a small farm that was visible from our house, though you'd have to cross Route 3A to get to it, and that was a busy road. He was one of the only Jewish kids I knew. The kitchen in his house had a wild, spicy smell that I loved. Steve and I played music in his room, fooled around with his father's barbells, and talked endlessly about a girl we both loved. Mr. Fishman was strict. Steve had an unbelievable number of chores to do before he could play with me. I helped him so he'd get done faster, but sometimes Steve ran off before his chores were finished. When that happened, his father always found out and sent Steve to his room. Mr. Fishman never told me I had to leave, but with Steve in his room, there was nothing for me to do, so I'd get on my bike and ride home. I took it hard whenever my friends got punished. It felt like I was getting punished too. Larry Waters lived down the street in an old farmhouse that had all kinds of attics, tool sheds, root cellars, workshops, garages, hay lofts with real trapdoors, barns, and even an underbarn. It was the perfect house for playing hide and seek or war. I loved going over there. There were 10 kids in Larry's family, and his house was always jammed with toys. Larry had a milky way of freckles and a mane of red hair, and he was the strongest kid I knew. I guess he'd been toughened up from the pounding he got from his big brothers. But those brothers passed down some great-looking sweaters to him, and Larry ranked us out for the pitiful clothes we wore. He had style, and he could curse like nobody's business. When he opened his mouth, a fantastic flood of swears would come spilling out. I don't mean one or two. I mean a whole stream of interconnected curses. And Larry was funny, too. One of the commercials on TV had a jingle that went like this. My advice, sir, get the ice, sir. Larry preferred to sing the song this way. My advice, sir, treat my friends nicer, or you'll get a big fat lip. The 4 of us, Andy, Larry, Steve, and I, were all in the same grade. We called ourselves the 4 Stooges. With my brother, Jimmy, I spent most of the time in the woods, climbing trees, exploring, looking for stuff. With my friends, I spent more time inside talking and trying to crack open the great mysteries: death, God, girls. One day, we were talking about kissing. Thing is, you don't just kiss her quick and then it's over, Larry said. Yeah, Andy agreed. What would you know? Larry shot back. Your ma's the only girl you've ever kissed. Laughter. Kissing takes a long time, Larry continued. One kiss might last 5-10 minutes. Pause. Yeah, Steve put in. You gotta hold your breath. Tough luck, guys, Larry grinned, leaned back, and loudly cracked his knuckles. I can hold my breath 15 seconds longer than any of you jokers. So when it comes to kissing, I'll be king. Oh, I love it. All right, our next chapter is entitled Jonathan Miller. And there's a picture of Bobby at Wrexham Beach. And so, I think we're headed to the beach. Steve, and Larry were my best friends. But in some ways, my closest best friend was a boy named Jonathan Miller. I met him one summer day at Humarock Beach. We spent no more than 5 hours together, but I've never forgotten him. Huh. Isn't that interesting? A best friend that he only spent one afternoon with. Do you have anybody in your life like that? I spotted him standing on one foot at the shore. I found some snoo. I realized he was talking to me. What's snoo? I asked. I don't know, he replied, grinning. What's snoo with you? I stared, not sure whether to laugh with him or at him. Look at that. He pointed at 3 little kids trying to dig a wall to protect a sandcastle. The tide was coming in fast, and the castle was in big trouble. He gave me a disgusted look. They're doing it all wrong. You need to dig a ditch, a real big one. Yeah, like a moat, I agreed, with a wall behind it. We jumped in to help the little kids. I started making a big sand wall as the first line of defense, while Jonathan raced around the beach gathering seaweed and pieces of driftwood to reinforce the wall. My brother Jimmy and 2 other kids came over to help, all of us digging like crazy. Waves kept attacking, and we kept fighting them off. We managed to protect the castle for another half hour until a big wave finally flattened it. Jonathan was from Oregon and was visiting his grandparents. Right away, I loved him the way you love a best friend. I loved the funny faces he made while telling a stupid joke. We hung around together all day, swimming, looking for shells and sea glass and bottle caps. We built our own sand fort higher up the beach and ate lunch there. 2 of my brothers wanted to come in the fort, but I shooed him away. 2 of my brothers wanted to come in the fort, but I shooed them away. I wasn't ready to share Jonathan. Not yet. I wish I'd brought something of mine to give him. The inside of a golf ball, an arrowhead, my shark tooth fossil. But I'd come to the beach with nothing. We could be blood brothers, I said. We'd need a knife or a sharp shell. Then we'd have to cut our fingers so the blood can run together. We don't need to, Jonathan said, leaning back in the fort. We're already blood brothers. I know we are. Yeah, I said, because it was true. At 4 o'clock, his grandmother yelled. Time for him to go. Bye, he said. Bye. The lump in my throat made it hard to talk. He started walking away, turned back once to wave, then ran to catch up with his grandparents. I never saw him again, but whenever anybody mentions Oregon, I always think of Jonathan. I like that. He can stay with him. Memories are wonderful that way. Next chapter, The Sound in the Wall. And now Ralph is 11 years old. And he's got a picture here when Johnny and Joey meet Santa Claus. My friend Jimmy Dean invited me to his birthday party. I'd never been to his house before. Marshfield was a historic place with lots of old houses, and Jimmy Dean lived in one of the oldest houses in town, built in the early 1700s, according to Mom. Come in, somebody yelled when I rang the doorbell. I stepped inside and walked down a short hallway into the kitchen. 2 big girls stood there staring at me. They looked like high school kids. Where's Jimmy? I asked. We're his sisters, one girl said. What's your name? Ralph. Don't worry, he'll be right down, Ralphie, the other girl replied. She looked at the present I'd brought. Just stick that on the bench. The girls stood beside a table with a big pile of raw hamburger meat on it. They were using their hands to form the red meat into flat patties and lining up the uncooked burgers on wax paper. I think he's kind of cute, the taller girl said. She stared at me and smiled. When I didn't smile back, the other one laughed. Don't look so serious. She picked up a small ball of uncooked meat, sprinkled salt on it, and popped it into her mouth. I nearly gagged. It's good raw, she told me. You ought to try some. I have to tell you, my mother used to do the same thing when she was making hamburger patties, and I could never understand it. But she would absolutely sprinkle a little salt on the raw hamburger meat, pop it into her mouth. It's good raw, she told me. You ought to try it. You ought to try some. Where's Jimmy? I asked again. Don't worry, he's coming. Hey, one girl said, glancing slyly at her sister. I'll show Ralphie the wall. Come on, kiddo. This is something you don't want to miss. She rinsed off her hands and walked into a small room next to the kitchen. I hesitated for a few seconds before following her. The girl brought me over to the wall and pushed my head so my ear was flush against it. Hear anything? I shook my head. She leaned against me, pressing my ear tighter to the wall. I smelled raw hamburger, but also the salty scent of her skin. She whispered into my ear, "It helps if you close your eyes." I tried that, and suddenly I did hear it. A low sound, steady, yet ragged, almost like a cat's purr, but wilder, more insistent. What is it? Bees, she murmured. A giant beehive. They've taken over the whole wall. You like honey, don't you, honey? She was teasing me, but I didn't care. I was hypnotized by that sound and the way it felt to have her pressing against me. You should get an exterminator, I said. But we don't want to, she hissed softly. We like our bees. I stood there, transfixed, unable to move, caught between her body and the sound of those bees. There must have been thousands of them, maybe millions. They sounded awfully hungry. Go on, she whispered. Take a really good listen. She leaned against me a little harder, and the buzzing grew louder. It seemed to spread from the wall into my ear to the side of my face, down my neck. The feeling moved through me until it felt like the wall, the girl, and I were all buzzing together. Fletch! It was Jimmy Dean, staring at me. What are you doing? The bees, I told him, pointing at the wall. Jimmy gave his big sister an annoyed look. Come on, we're going to go play war, he yelled. He raced out of the room with me following close behind. It felt good to be moving at full speed, past the grinning girls, past the pile of uncooked hamburger meat on the table, through the back screen door until we burst together into the blinding sunlight like a couple of bees released from a jar. Oh, I love it. I can just see them springing through those doors. All right, I think one more chapter for today. This one is entitled War, and it's a photo of Jimmy and Ralph. Jimmy and me, it says. Here we go. We loved war. There were always enough kids around to play football or baseball or hide and seek or kick the can, and those games were fun. But good old war was the best game we played by far, and we went at it every chance we got. There were 10 kids at Jimmy Dean's birthday party, and we quickly divided into 2 armies. Then there was a frantic scramble as we each tried to find the right gun. A short, gun-shaped stick made an excellent pistol. Longer sticks became rifles, and if there was a twig or bump at the end, you had a telescopic sight. I made a machine gun out of a stick 2 feet long with a thicker piece at the base I could steady against my shoulder. Weapons mattered. Plenty of times I started a battle holding nothing but a skinny twig or funny-shaped board. There was nothing better than having the right gun. I always felt dangerous when I was fully armed, packing serious heat. War was simple. We hunted each other. All of us had seen enough movies and TV shows to know how to make war. We knew how to stay low, how to use trees and rocks for cover, how to crawl under bushes and clothes-ripping briars. When we got close enough to an exposed enemy soldier, we opened fire by sounding a single pow or brrr burst of machine gun fire. Pa-da-da-da-da-da-da! I screamed to Jimmy Dean. Gotcha! You wish, he yelled back from behind a bush. Hey, I smoked you. You're dead. No way. I jumped back. I That killed you. You're gone. Nothing on earth was more thrilling than stealing close enough to get a clean shot at a real live enemy soldier. To be good at war, you had to know how to sneak, stalk, and shoot. But the most important thing was knowing how to die. Each of us died differently. When Steve got hit, he let out an ugh, grabbed his gut, and did a neat forward flip that sent him rolling over and over before he finally lay still. I admired that move a lot and tried to copy it. When someone shot Jimmy Dean, he dropped his gun and fell straight back. Andy often got shot, but most times he refused to die. Now he grabbed his right arm, face twisted in horrible pain. "Argh!" he screamed. "What's wrong?" Larry yelled. "I'm hit! Send reinforcements!" Andy screamed, his limb dangling uselessly. In the midst of a ferocious firefight, Larry rushed over, half dragging, half supporting Andy until Andy could scramble to safety. Suddenly, Jimmy jumped up and blasted Larry. Larry stopped and swayed for a second, hanging in the air, slack-jawed. Then he fell straight forward, allowing his face to mash into the dirt. For years, I had studied Larry's technique. I tried it myself at home when nobody was around, falling forward in a pile of leaves, letting my body drop like dead weight. But no matter how many times I practiced or how hard I tried, some stubborn part of me, arm, leg, or knee, insisted on reaching out at the last minute to break my fall. I finally gave up and accepted the truth. I'd never be able to die like Larry. None of us could. I was moving along the side of the house when Steve Fishman jumped out in front of me. There was no place to hide. He fired at me point blank, and I jerked back 3 times like I'd been punched in the chest. My eyes took on a dazed look. My body went limp, and I fell, spinning to one side and rolling over 4 times. Then I lay without moving a muscle, slowly counting to 60. Finally, I sat up, grinning, knowing I died well. That moment reminded me of when I used to play statue with Mom and Dad when I was little. It always felt so special when I turned from stone back into a boy. Playing war was like that too. I loved how it felt to wake up from being dead, dust off the dirt and leaves, and start the next round of the game. And that is where we'll stop today. I do appreciate the way that Ralph Fletcher is able to bring things back. And he closes out his chapters, kind of wrapping it right up. It's a gift. He is a gift for doing that. So think about fun games that you're playing with your families, with your friends, things that you miss doing that you could write about. And just try and jot down some of the things that are special about that. And maybe that will prompt you to write a little bit more about it this weekend. Take care of yourselves. Stay well. Read. Write. And I will look forward to seeing you next time. Goodbye.